All right, good afternoon. I'll call to order the April 2nd meeting of the Site Plan Review Technical Advisory Committee for the City of Portsmouth. I'll note that we have a quorum. First item of business is approval of the March 5th minutes. Are there any edits or comments? Or motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes have been approved. First item is old business A, the request of Riggs Enterprise LLC owner for property located at 822 Route 1 bypass, requesting site plan review approval to demolish the existing building and construct a new commercial building, as well as associated paving, stormwater management, lighting, utilities, and landscaping. Property is located on Assessor Map 160, Lot 29, and lies within the business district.
Thanks, Peter. Alex Ross, engineer surveyor. I prepared the plans. I'm here with the owner, Rich, and the contractor, Dave. I guess what I could do is go through the list of comments and go
Sure,
through
that'd
each
be great.
item. So the first item on the list is proposed utilities must be installed in Burkett Street. So that's fine. We did have a gas line in the grass strip, so we'll move that over, and all new utilities will be under the pavement. The second item is dealing with the water line. Change 6-inch fire service into a 6-inch main with flushing hydrant at the end. So we can definitely add that information and notes to the plan. Next item is third-party oversight of work in city right-of-way may be required. So we did want to discuss that one. Mac Construction, who's done a lot of work for the city, in the city, did a lot of work on this site to remove the tanks. He will be doing the work. So that's just an additional expense that we don't feel is necessary. Of course, there will be city inspections, and he'll be working closely with the city while doing all the work on site. Next item is Burkett Street will need to be milled and overlaid after the conclusion of the utility work. So we can add notes to that effect on the plan. We also did want to have a discussion, not sure if this board has the authority, but to put the utilities in Burkett, to repave all of Burkett, to redo all the off-site drainage that comes on site, and repair all the catch basins, put in new ones, as well as repair catch basins in the bypass, is at a considerable expense. So we'd be asking if it's possible to waive hookup fees, which are typical fees when you're hooking into sewer, water. And I know, like, for instance, on 806, there would be a sewer hook-in fee that is a significant amount. I think that's $7,500. So we would ask the city to consider that. Next item is move the
Alex,
duct.
I'm not sure that's true.
I
There's
think
already a building there.
Yeah, so when we talked to Jim Tao, what he said is he needs us to hook into the new sewer. And the way that was installed, the city already put in the new sewer, and it's necessary to tie into the new sewer at a considerable tie-in fee. And we can have that discussion again with you and
We'll have it offline.
Jim, but we're just trying to see if there's any way to reduce the cost of all of this. Next item, move dumpsters further back towards the back of the building. So we do have some leeway there. I think we can shift those dumpsters back just a little bit. Next item, show outline of roof overhang in regards to the front sidewalk. So what actually happens with the roof is the drip edge of the roof is the outside line of the sidewalk. But we can clarify that on the plans. It's shown on the architectural plans. Next item is move light pole 1 closer to the building. So right now, it's almost in the bypass or in the right-of-way, or right on the line. So we can definitely move that back. We have room to kind of shift the parking around there and make sure that light pole is on the actual property. Next item, move light pole 2 closer to parking lot entrance. So yeah, right now, light pole 2 is about mid-depth of the parcel. And we can definitely move that up so that it is closer to the entrance. Next item, add a light pole to west entrance of parking lot. And if you recall on 806, there actually is a light pole there, but we will make sure that's added to the lighting plan and our plan, so it's clear what's going on there.
Yeah, so the intent there is to light up the entrance driveway. And I specifically looked at that while I was there this morning, and it's not doing that now.
Right,
So you'd have to add a fixture to that pole,
sure,
okay?
yes. Next item, drain manholes must have inverts. And we'll definitely add that to the plan. So there will be inverts in the drain manholes. Next item, please include stormwater management operations and maintenance manual. That will be submitted to the city. And we've actually uploaded that with a revised set of plans. So that's fine. Next item, the plans show landscaping in the DOT right-of-way. So we actually met with New Hampshire DOT yesterday to review all their comments and recommendations. And they actually want that whole island that's in the right-of-way to be concrete. So we'll make sure we show that on the plan, remove all landscaping in the bypass. And it's just, we've been working with DOT. We should have their approval soon. We wanted to make sure we went through all the comments. Next item is site plan amendment for 806. So if you recall, 806, that's the abutting parcel that we went before you. And because of this drainage layout, we will be shifting that, and we plan on doing a site plan amendment. It's really minor, but we can make sure that goes through the proper procedure.
Alex, just on that, do you think, I mean, that plan expires in June. You've already gotten one-year extension?
Yeah, I think we can wrap that up prior to
think you can
that,
get-
so we don't
okay.
need to, yeah, that's pretty minor. The next item was utility plans need to be updated to show utilities in pavement area, and that was the same as an earlier one, so we've actually since done that and uploaded it, but we'll make sure that's clarified on the plan. So I think that's it on the items.
Okay. Any additional comments?
I just want to make sure we don't lose something. So there's multiple off-site properties that drain through this lot, and then the drainage goes down Burkett Street into the city system. So all the permanent drainage that gets installed needs drainage easements for all the multiple properties that drain through this lot, and I'm not suggesting necessarily that it's a fixed easement, but something needs to be memorialized that allows that to happen.
And I think initially, we had talked about all the issues on this parcel, so we were planning on doing a drainage easement, doing an easement to allow Burkett to pass through the property, because currently there is nothing. And then also the fact that there's existing city drain and sewer structures on the property. So we plan on working with the city to get the correct easements in place.
Okay, so that would be a condition, so we're clear.
And I don't know what sort of precedent there is on hookup fees, or if this is the board to have that discussion, or directly with DPW.
It is not, and quite frankly, it's an issue between a private or a city-held utility and you. So it has nothing to do with the planning department per se. But we can investigate further and make sure that things are as appropriate as possible.
Any other comments from tech?
Just one minor, looks like the snow storage area also has the plantings in it, so I don't know if those plantings will withstand the snow being piled on them.
They are.
Will we need an easement plan for this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that included anywhere in here, Alex? An easement
And
plan?
it has not been, but it will be.
So when the DOT, they won't let you landscape the island in the front, even if you maintain it?
So currently, if you look at the existing conditions plan, there's an island that's entirely in the bypass. And what we want to do is clean up those driveways and extend it to the property line. But that island that exists is all concrete surfaced. And that's what they want to see when we're done.
So they wouldn't entertain having a landscape that you guys would maintain or anything?
No, he was pretty adamant on the concrete, because we asked about plants in front, and he said they would prefer to have nothing.
Okay.
Sounds right.
Yep. Okay, thanks for trying.
Any other comments at the moment? Otherwise, we'll open it up for any public comment. Anyone here from the public wish to speak on this application? Check Zoom.
Pre-construction stuff.
If you're on Zoom and would like to speak on this application, please raise your hand. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion and open it back up for discussion.
How is that light pole one going to be moved? You're going to move that into where the parking spaces are now?
Yes, so we actually uploaded a new plan set. I don't know if we can bring that up.
It's a viewpoint.
Yeah. But
no, we
what
can't.
would happen is, we have enough room in the parking to kind of part the Red Sea and make a little bit of space for that light pole.
Yeah, because it looks like your aisle width is 27 feet, so you do have some room there to move
Right.
stuff around.
Yeah.
And then this is not gonna happen, right? It's
Right,
just gonna
that's all
remain
gonna
as
be-
is.
All going to be concrete. And then when we
And
get on
no
the
island on
property-
your property?
What's that?
No island on your property, or no? Are you going to try?
Well, that little kind of dog leg coming in would be on
You
the
have
front.
this.
But the width of the The DOT island will be the same as it is now?
Right.
Okay. So the easement plan, that's something that we need to see. Want to make sure we get that before the planning board meeting.
Yes, I know Tim Phoenix's office has had some discussion with the city, just roughly of, what easements do we need, sort of thing. So we're definitely planning on that, and we can
Okay.
get an easement plan going.
Okay.
So the electrical design for the lot is still in flux. Eversource is still trying to figure out how to power this building. So that's still out there, but I think we can work with them on that portion of the design. That's the only thing that's really still outstanding. So because of that, with the condition of the easements,
Yep.
I would make a motion to move this forward.
Easements and, what was the other? We had another was it just the easement stipulation?
All the comments that were.
And all the comments, but
On
in
the
terms of
previous.
stipulations, these have to be met.
Right, the previous comments have to be addressed, and the correct easements in place, and provide an easement plan.
Yep.
That's what I had.
Okay.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, on to new business. Item A, the request of ZJBV Properties LLC owner for property located at 180 Islington Street, requesting a conditional use permit in accordance with Section 10.1112.14 of the zoning ordinance to provide, and it should say 3 parking spaces where 9 are required. Said property is located on Assessor Map 137, Lot 19, and lies within the Character District 4-L2 and Historic District. Hey, Chris.
Good afternoon, Peter, and members of the committee. Chris Mulligan from Bozen and Associates on behalf of the applicant. With me to my right is Zeke Blumenfeld. He is the potential lessee of the unit that we are attempting to convert into a retail, or attempting to get approval to use as a retail establishment, approximately 1,100 square feet for the retail sale of antiques. The property at 180 Islington Street is, according to city tax records, the building structure on the property was built in 1840. Have to assume it was built as a single-family residence or otherwise as dwellings. The building inspection file dates back, has information dating back to 1973. Everything dating back to 1973 in the building inspection file indicates that commercial uses were existent on the property at that time. So we're talking 50 years at least of commercial uses. Obviously, there are storefronts that have been installed, and I think most of us remember the Allmake Sew and Vac that was there for many, many years as a retail establishment. But in any event, as it stands now, there is a apartment on the second floor and a tattoo/piercing parlor on the other unit on the first floor, and Zeke would take over the remaining space on the first floor for retail purposes. What we are before you, and we've got an application before the planning board, is a conditional use permit for the amount of required parking under your ordinance. We would need at least 8 and probably 9 spaces, combining all the uses and rounding up. Altus Engineering, Eric Weinrib is here with us. They prepared a plan and a parking demand analysis, which we believe indicates that the amount of parking that is required for this space vastly exceeds what would be necessary given the available off-street parking in the immediate vicinity and the proximity both to downtown and to the parking garage. What we have provided you is the tax map, the site plan, and the parking demand analysis. The site plan, if we look at that, I can tell you the existing configuration of buildings on the property does not afford us any ability to have conforming parking spaces. What has traditionally occurred on the site is people have parked to the right of the entrance as you're looking at it from Islington Street in a driveway. There have been two stacked parking spaces, or two stacked vehicles parked there on occasion, and then we have another non-compliant space to the left of the entrance. Again, none of these spaces meets code, so for our purposes, and for purposes of what we're requesting from the planning board for a conditional use permit is 0 spaces where 9 would otherwise be required. You have received some public comment I'd like to address real quickly. One was primarily had to do with the fact that the spaces or the non-compliant parking spaces that are in use on the property should not in any manner conflict with the sidewalk. We agree with that. This is a property where there's no clear delineation between the paved portion of our property and the sidewalk. It all sort of runs together. I believe that will change as the city improves Islington Street, but obviously a condition of approval should be that we will not conflict with the existing right-of-way or the sidewalk. The other public comment had to do with the owner exploring the possibility of converting some of the green space on the property into parking. And, frankly, I think if the owner could pull that off, he wouldn't be opposed to it, but the only real space would be what you see as a patio area, lawn patio area in the rear, that sort of rear square at the back of the property. Thank you, Peter, that's it. There's about an 8.5 foot choke point between the building and its closest, the closest boundary there. So even if we could get through legally to do that, there's just not enough space. At most, we would get 1 or possibly 2 cars back there that would have to make enormous maneuvers to get out, and they would likely be juggling, spaces. We could have a situation where we have 2 or 3 cars trying to back out onto Islington Street. So not only would we lose all the green space we have, which I think would be, suboptimal, we would have a situation that I don't think, appropriate planning would approve of, just because I think it would be a safety hazard. So that's my take on the public comment. With respect to the comments that TAC provided on Friday, I'd like to just review those. The existing sewer lateral could be collapsed, and video inspection of the line is necessary to confirm, replace if necessary. Obviously, the owner, if he has to replace the sewer lateral, that's his responsibility, and he will do so. For your purposes today, I believe you're only limited to reviewing the parking demand analysis and making a recommendation. So I'm not sure that's relevant to the conditional use permit application we have, but we've noted that that's a concern, and again, if its replacement is required, then it's up to the owner to do it, and we would agree with that. As far as the handicap parking space, our position on this is that we have no compliant parking on this site. Therefore, we're not required to provide a handicap parking space. There is no ADA accessible access to this property, so a handicap parking space, by definition, has to be as close as possible to the nearest handicap accessible entry. There is none, and this is a property that's in the historic district, so we believe we're exempt from that requirement anyway. Parking may not block the sidewalk. We agree with that, and we discussed that. A condition to run with approval, that's acceptable, and we understand that. The final CUP request should be for 3 existing non-conforming spaces where 9 are required. I actually believe the proper request would be for 0 existing spaces where 9 are required. Again, that's because these spaces are not conforming. The only way we could utilize them, in my opinion, is by getting variances to so utilize them. I think it's just more efficient to get the conditional use permit for the entirety of the parking deficit. No matter what that number is, we're not going to meet it. So that, it seems to us unnecessary to have to go through the exercise of going through the zoning board to establish the 3 parking spaces. Plans need to be updated to show designated parking areas, dimensions, and vehicle designations. That's fine. Eric can do that. The plan, and Eric can jump in if I'm stating this wrong, but the plan would be to have the proposed bike rack on the left side of the entrance as you're looking at it from Islington Street, and then to have the striping for scooter parking on the other side. So, unless you have any questions, that's everything I've got.
All right, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Questions, comments from TAC members?
Yeah, so I probably missed it somewhere along the way, but so is the application that you would get rid of all vehicle-sized parking spaces, period? And then what happens with the residential tenant? Do they have a space right now designated, or
There's no designated spaces. I mean, people are parking.
Sure.
where
So
they-
now, though, whoever's living upstairs needs to then park somewhere else,
Yeah.
off-site?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then I just want to clear something up as well. So just because it's historical doesn't mean that it's exempt from having some sort of an accessible entrance, meaning that it may not be wheelchair accessible, right? Because there's many types of impairments, mobility impaired, vision impaired.
Sure.
Hearing, right? So to the extent practical, as we move forward with these properties, and any property through the city, as we renovate and repair and reconfigure the space on the inside, we will be held to certain accessibility standards, right? Maybe not necessarily removing historical entrance and replacing it with a ramp. Can't ask you to do that. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
But we have been told by accessibility experts, and we've worked with them throughout the state, that as we renovate the interior, we need to be mindful of that. So I would say that if there was any way possible to have an accessible parking stall, so that if somebody gets out of their vehicle and they are mobility impaired, they have a cane, they're being escorted, they have poor vision, right, that they wouldn't want to have to walk a half a mile or a quarter mile to get to the, to share the same experience that everyone else is going to be able to have within that retail environment, right? So just be mindful of that for this application and others moving forward. We always want to see a short distance for an accessible parking spot so they can, that person can enjoy the same experience that someone without some sort of impairment can, right?
Sure.
So, but I get it, you're tight on space here, I'm looking at the plan, but if there's a way to get an accessible spot in, I highly recommend it, that's all.
Okay.
That's it.
Understood.
Yep.
Can I speak to that? Eric Weinrub with Alta. So I guess what you're suggesting is that the space, I'll call it on the right side, the easterly side of Islington Street, access, we can make that an ADA space. It wouldn't necessarily be fully compliant, and we can stripe it ADA, but can we put non-exclusive?
Actually, because there's less than 4 spaces on the site, I think any ADA space may be non-exclusive.
That may be, I don't have that language at the
Yeah.
top of my head.
I remember we went into this when we were doing the Davenport Inn project.
Did you want to
Yeah,
go
I
out
think
there?
that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
But, you know, the ADA, an ADA space should be 16 feet wide. I don't know if we even have 16 feet there.
We have 16 feet on that side,
Yeah.
but we don't have the full depth.
Yep.
The tough part, right, it wouldn't be necessarily van accessible, but once again, you don't have the scenario to get a wheelchair inside of the historic entrance anyway. But it would provide, like we said, for someone that is impaired some other way, it would be good to have that spot. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, if you can get a 13-foot, you know, that gives you the 8 plus 5, which is a typical space, so it's not van accessible.
Right.
You know, if you could do that, that would be
Right,
better.
right, sure, yeah.
You know, it needs to be, and with the Islington Street project, the sidewalk's going to be coming closer to the building. There will be a, you know, grass strip or a brick strip, is it, and then the sidewalk's behind that, so.
The sidewalk's going to go onto the property line?
No, it'll be, you know, be right up to the property line.
Right, and that's where it is now.
Yeah. But right now, the sidewalk goes all the way to the curb, and it won't in the future. There'll be a brick strip in there. Just a point of, you know, don't want to be parking hanging out over the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, understood.
So I just had one comment, not to confuse things even more, but our comment about the 3 spaces was based on an earlier interpretation that the businesses were occupied. And so it sounds like you're willing to go forward with the planning board with 0 spaces, but we'd be willing to support having 2 spaces because there's been a continuous residential use in there. They're not conforming spaces, but there has been 2 spaces there. So
Yeah.
to say that you had 2 spaces, I think that's something that we could support with the planning board. To say there's 3, as we had earlier said, doesn't make sense because they haven't been occupied continuously, the
Okay, that's-
businesses.
So we would have one on each side.
Well, I think it's the 2 stacked.
I think the 2 stacked.
Well, the 2 stacked, but
For the
where we
residential,
need to,
they're not conforming, but,
but where we need to put that ADA space would have to be on the other side.
well, that would be a separate request. I don't know if that would be something outside of the CUP. I don't know how that would work, because you're trying to get a CUP for conforming
Right.
spaces, and you have 2 non-conforming spaces that we would say
Did-
could count as your 2 spaces.
I mean,
But you still
people are
need
using
9.
3 now.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, it's my preference, and I don't know how that works as far as zoning and so
I
forth.
think
is
you'll
that
have to
we keep
decide how
3.
you want the plan to look, and then we would say that in terms of spaces that have been there in existence, there's 2 that go with the residents that would be allowed. In terms of, they've been customarily used and with the use.
And you would let
hasn't
us have
stopped.
the 3rd space as a handicap accessible space?
I think that's something the planning board is going to have to decide. I think you'd have to ask for that as part of the CUP, but then you're backing into the
Yeah,
street.
then that kicks in the whole backing into, and,
But they already are, so it's.
right.
They are, but they have
it's a new
been-
use
And
being
that's a new use,
established,
so that's why we wouldn't support that as much. And the planning board,
The other
Supported
option,
some.
the other.
the other option
2.
is to make
2.
all that front space for scooters or motorcycles or bicycles,
Yeah, we
where they
can't,
can turn around and,
well, we can't do that if we have to provide any sort of ADA.
right, so
Well, I'm not
that's
saying
the
you
question
have
that
to,
needs to be
but I
answered.
just want you to consider that
Yeah.
in your research, and I know, I apologize for not having brought that up in an earlier comment. I thought the request was, I didn't think that I'd have an opinion on the request, but now that we're kind of here looking at it.
Sure.
You know, I don't want you guys to get exposed to a lawsuit down the road because someone was being excluded, right? If there's a way to make it happen, then I would. If you can honestly create a narrative that says that we couldn't do it, we're not required to do it, that works.
The
Is that for-
proposed use for this in the future is,
Antique vintage resale retail.
right, which may be more useful to have an ADA spot for that kind of use.
Yeah, you also, Mr. Wolf brought forward that the interior of the space, because I'm decorating it for retail display case, whether or not it's ADA compliant for necessary on parking space outside. Is there any literature I could get to make sure I design the interior of the space so it's not creating an exclusive environment?
Absolutely, yeah, you can
Yeah.
reach out to me, at any point in time, but the existing building code has a chapter designated towards accessibility requirements and what other parts of the code it will send you to. So if you're building a bathroom inside there, for example, then the code does require that it's an accessible bathroom, even though you don't have an accessible entrance.
A bathroom currently exists there now.
That's fine, if you're building a new one. So if you applied to build a brand-new bathroom, then more than likely it would need to be ADA accessible, yeah. But yeah, anytime. You can just reach out, shoot me an email, set up an appointment, stop by, I'd be happy to help.
Thank you very much.
And a point of clarification about the parking demand analysis. I think what you've provided is a parking requirement analysis and not a parking demand analysis. I think you need to show what you expect the uses to demand for parking, what they would typically need or generate, not what the zoning requires for parking. You can get that from, IT parking generation manual, other sources.
Yep. We can look at that.
I mean, obviously, you don't have the parking, it's not going to affect those changes, but it affects that 9 number, is it going to be 9, or is it actually going to be a higher demand? That's what they're looking for in a demand analysis.
Okay.
Further comments?
You know how much width you have from the front of the building to the property line?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah. I wonder if it's 6 feet, enough for a bike.
It's more than that. I think on the right side, it's
That's
closer to 16, so it's probably 6 to 8, somewhere in there.
Okay. So you got enough room for bikes then,
Bikes and
scooters.
and a mopeds and so forth.
All right, well, let's open it up for any public comment. Is there anyone here or on Zoom wishing to speak to this application? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment portion and open it back up for discussion. So I guess the question is, is that handicap space required, or is it for this?
It's a good question. I don't know, have a definitive
Yeah.
answer on that.
I think the planning board needs us to review it and just see whether it can go forward. I don't have a problem with proposing it go forward to the planning board for their review. I think addressing the demand analysis, would we want to see that again? Or you think
No, I think it's,
either way, it's,
Yeah.
2 or 0 spaces is all we would support,
Yep.
is what I think they've heard. So I'm comfortable making a motion that we support sending this forward to the planning board.
Certainly with the condition that any parking does not block the sidewalk.
Good, yep. Was that a second?
That'll be a second, yeah.
Any additional conditions, or is it?
Can I just suggest that the dimensions be added to the site plan? That's part of the planning board.
Dimensions be added to the site plan? Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, item B of new business, the request of 635 Sagamore Development LLC owner for property located at 635 Sagamore Avenue requesting site plan approval for the removal of the existing structures and construction of 4 single-family dwellings on 1 lot with associated site improvements. Said property is located on assessor map 222, Lot 19, and lies within the Single Residence A district.
Is this for the Luster cluster?
It is.
It's not really a cluster. Want me to do an overview of the project, or?
Yes, please.
All right. So thank you. Joe Coronati, Jones and Beach Engineers. With me, I have Mike Garapi, representing the owner. We were here on this site a while back to discuss how to determine the best way, or the best way to determine the driveway entrance location, given the property has existing really wide curb cut, but it's also next to the top of the hill at Sagamore Ave. And so we discussed that. We've been working with Eric quite a bit, which I appreciate taking the time to do that, on different sightline distances, profiles, stopping sight distance, intersection sight distance, and we've come up with what I think is the best location for the driveway based on all the back and forth that we had and all the profiles that we did. So now the driveway is on the is proposed on the northern side of the property, which is basically the low side of the land, furthest from the peak of the hill. And it's still a 4-unit condominium development. It's 4 single-family homes, a really short little driveway with a turnaround. It'll obviously be a private drive. And with that, we have designed, the sewer and the water, currently showing propane tanks for the site, which I think is one of the questions that this committee had, was, are we planning on bringing in propane? And so one of the, we talked recently about bringing in natural gas, rather. We talked about that recently. Right now, the natural gas ends at the southern side of the Tidewatch driveway entrance, and we'd have to bring it up the road in front of 607 Sagamore, basically, and then into the site, which we're certainly willing to explore. I know our time frame is quickly vanishing, given that you're doing all your finish work on Sagamore. And so that was something that I guess we'd like to discuss and see if, Peter, do you mind switching to the utility plan? And I can, so right now, I think the best location to bring that gas main would be under the sidewalk. There's a sidewalk from Tidewatch that runs up towards the Luster King. If we keep it in the road, we end up having to cross your water main. And I'd assume you'd want to not do that. And talking with Severino today, they are removing that. The sidewalk project goes all the way to the Tidewatch entrance. So it would seem like the only place to really bring it up the road would be under that sidewalk and behind that utility pole that's right in front of 607 Sagamore, unless you want us to keep it in the road, which, and if that's a good location, we can drop a sketch, try to get it to Unitil in time. If this doesn't work out, we're perfectly fine with sticking with the propane tanks that we have. They'd be buried propane. And if that ends up being what has to be, it's not the end of the world for us at all. The other aspect was a similar comment relative to the water main, water service to this development. And the request was to put it into the driveway. And so we can do that. We got to shuffle around some of the utilities down there. We might have to, move that first sewer manhole further into the property a little bit so we can get our 10-foot separation. And then ideally, we would tap the water main right in our driveway with an 8-inch, come into the site, maybe 20 feet, add a hydrant, probably to the right side of the drive as you enter, and then reduce it down to a domestic water service size, like a 2-inch or something to supply water to the buildings. So we have no problem doing that change. That's something, though, that we would have to also, I think, do that work in the next 2 weeks, I believe. From what I understand, I think the work's either commencing on April 15th. Is that
That's
true?
about when Roger said from Severino that they wanted to get out there, but it might be a little bit later than that. But in April is when we are going to plan starting our improvements in Sagamore Ave. So I would suggest tapping the water main and getting out of the right-of-way prior to then.
All right. And are they starting on this side of I don't know what the project limits at all, really. I haven't seen the plans. But.
All right, it goes from the end of the new sidewalk at the bridge on crossing Sagamore Creek to the entrance to Little Harbor Road.
Oh, all right. Down by the cemetery.
Yes.
Yeah. And so they're starting at the bridge side, or?
They haven't really given me a strong answer either way.
Oh, all right.
There's a little bit of water work that, cutting and capping of an abandoned water service down by that scuba shop, but the rest of the conversation has been starting closer to the cemetery, so they have a reason to start at either end.
Yeah, I guess we're sort of in the middle anyway, so it won't be there right away. But so time is of the essence, I guess, either way. So we can certainly draw up those two scenarios and get them to Public Works after this meeting, so at least you guys can sort of bless those locations, I would hope, and then we can get Roger to install them. He'd be doing the work for us as well.
Okay.
Is there going to be sprinkler lines as well, by special?
We were not planning on doing sprinklers. I think at the time the conversation was, it was sprinklers or a turnaround.
Or a compliant turnaround with the 2018 IFC, which I don't believe that you have that. So.
Right, so we kind of need the turnaround is useful for a lot of other, a lot of purposes, delivery trucks and things like that. So with that, we were planning on just doing the hydrant and then not sprinkling the buildings.
So the turnaround that I see in the plans does not appear to be a compliant turnaround with the 2018 IFC. So the choice is to have a compliant turnaround or sprinkler buildings. You can have a non-compliant turnaround in sprinkler buildings, that's fine.
And what would be I'll have to look and see what there must be size requirements on the turnaround.
Yeah, there's size requirements.
Yeah.
It's in Appendix D of the 2018 International Fire Code.
Is it 2018?
2018, yep.
Yeah.
Appendix D. And David.
Right. Yeah, so we can look at that. Either way will be, I guess, to simplify at least the water main tapping, we'd be tapping it with an 8-inch at least to get to the hydrant anyways, so we can kind of determine that a little bit later, but we'll have that figured out before the next TAC meeting. And then, Mike, did I give you my copies? No, wait, no. And then just going through the comments, Obviously, the majority of them revolve around the drainage. And so I think first drainage comment talks about the soils, hydrologic soil group B on the site. I have a memo from Jim Gove that goes over hydrologic soil groups, how they were determined. With a B soil, it's actually the most conservative type of design, because when you have the greater difference between the curve numbers when it's a B soil, so we can certainly increase that to a C soil, but there's actually less of a change between pavement and woods when you go with a C soil. So you actually get a more conservative design with the B soils. But he has a pretty lengthy explanation, as you can imagine, talking about the soils are Chatfield Hollis, rock outcroppings, so you have a variation of soils on this site where you have ledge, you have sand, you have rock. So he basically took all the test pit data that he got and had to determine, based on what he saw, what the underlying soil group would be, and he called that Group B. He said there is a way to do a composite where we look at the different soil groups and average them together, which we can do. But I guess I'll get into that more, I think, on the final comment of the drainage. We can combine the hydrographs as suggested. We can change the outfall to bioretention pond number 1. The reason we had it on the had it in the location we did was so that, as noted in the report, and as I think all the Tidewatch residents know, that, the water basically runs down their driveway on the uphill side of their drive, kind of follows that curve, and basically heads towards their mailbox, their mailroom, sometimes probably going out into their road, because the ditch, if there ever was a ditch in that area, it's kind of gone. If there never was, then it's probably been occurring for quite a long time. We put it in that location, the outfall to our bioretention pond number 1, just so the length of time of concentration would be increased for treatment, but we can certainly put that outfall on the other side of the pond, closer to where the water eventually goes, so it's not running along their driveway as long. And I know Mike Garapi and Paige from my office did have a meeting with the Tidewatch Condo Association just last week, right? And I think discussed a lot of these items also. And I think we'd probably have to do that a little bit more. Maybe have another meeting. There was talk at that meeting about a culvert being added. And then I believe, based on the emails I saw, I was out last week, but that I believe Tidewatch has engaged to work with John Shagnon to review all the drainage. So there will be a third-party review of the stormwater being done. I think they're the ones that are mainly would have any concerns, so I would hope that would be adequate for your third-party review, as he'll be clearly looking at their stormwater and hired to do so. And I think that's where we can solve some of the items about the soil groups, whether if we're gonna add a culvert, where would it go? Would it tie into a catch basin? Would it go under the road? What utilities are in Tidewatch's roadway, which are probably all of them, that we'd have to cross. If we were to do something like that, there's definitely wetlands all along the low side of Tidewatch's driveway. I don't know if we'd have to get into, conditional use permitting for all that work, and because I know they seem like, I guess they're wetlands now, but they seem like they're all constructed drainage ponds. I don't know if that changes setbacks at all or anything.
It depends on the size. If they're less than 10,000 square feet, maybe not, but if they're wetlands, they're wetlands.
All right.
Excuse me, could you say it a little louder?
I answered his question that the wetlands is, if they're less than 10,000 square feet, they may not have a city buffer. But if they're more than 10,000 square feet and they're delineated as wetlands, then they would qualify and need a buffer, 100-foot buffer. So a wetland conditional use permit for any work in that.
Would working with Ambit be considered the third-party engineer if they're working for Tidewatch in this scenario?
I think we'd want to give them, probably come up with a contract with ourselves, whoever the third party would be.
All right. Maybe that could be Ambit. If Tidewatch is willing, I don't know. We do have stormwater reductions, flow rate reductions at all the analysis points. One of the comments talks about how to, adding low-impact designs. I think we have added quite a few low-impact designs. We have 2 bioretention ponds, we have drip edges, along just the homes that are in fill. Units 3 and 4 have walkout basements and are up in fill, so we added stone drip edges to their, to the sides of those units. Units 1 and 2 are in a cut, so they're not, we did not add stone drip edges to those units. Obviously, a lot of the stormwater from this site currently flows right into Sagamore Ave. So pretty much what we focused on, a lot of the stormwater we have, we're taking that stormwater towards the rear of the site, putting our catch basins up by the front of our drive, adding yard drains in between the homes, trying to get less water onto Sagamore Ave, which is a good thing for everybody. And then we have those ponds out back, and the bioretention pond 1, that one's pretty much built out of fill. We're not excavating very deep into the ground there, so it's kind of a raised pond. And I think that's, well, I'll get into the, I guess a couple more. Landscaping-wise, we had a landscape designer, Lise McNaughton, do I think a pretty robust landscaping plan. That the site is mostly wooded, but the trees that are out there are mature and very well pruned, maybe too well pruned. And so what we're trying to accomplish here with this landscape design is to create a lower buffer. There's plenty of tall trees being left on the site, but because they're pruned right up the trunk of the tree, you can kind of see between all the trees very easily. So this goal of this design is more of a creating an understory to the trees that are out there, and to provide buffers to the neighbors, to the road, some privacy, and I think it won't take much to basically, when you're driving on Tidewatch's road, you're looking up the hill towards the back of units 3 and 4. These, sort of a low buffer of trees, of dense trees, and that sort of a line will sort of block a lot of that building, because you're basically looking from a downward perspective up at the backs of the buildings, which I think will help a lot. And I'm sure it fills in once leaf pops out, more than what it looks like right now anyways. And then one of the comments was provide a condo plan. I know in the past, we've never done that. It was always something that was done after the plans were approved and recorded. We would do a condominium site plan with is the city going to be signing the condo site plans now?
Just want to see where you have the limited common area and how you've got it laid out.
All right. So it won't be something that the city signs and records?
No.
Just want to see the
No,
locations?
just to see
All
that,
right.
make sure it doesn't create a subdivision.
Sure. That's all I have. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks. Comments, questions from TAC members?
We anticipate blasting?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I would presume so.
It's based on the, I mean, I didn't know if you're hammering versus blasting, I don't know the amount of, you found a lot of different types of situations.
Yeah, there's definitely ledge all over the property. But there's kind of large rolling sections of ledge, and, you dig between them and it's soil.
Right, yeah.
Dig on top of it, it's ledge. So a lot of those will have to be, I think, trimmed off, for the utilities, there'll definitely be some blasting, similar to what you guys went through on all of, Sagamore Ave for all that sewer install. But a lot of the design, we're trying to stay above,
Right.
the grade as much as possible, reduce that. So, and as far as it's blasted or hammered, I guess we'd normally leave that up to the contractor.
sure.
And once you get the trees removed, the site soil stripped off, you can we can't get in there with a big machine when we dig test pits.
Yeah.
So we're using a, mini excavator or backhoe or something. But I suspect it'll be a mix of blasting and hammering.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
There'll be a
Not-
time
not
for
yet.
public comment.
So you have been in touch with Tidewash about a possible culvert to not shed all the water next to their mailbox?
Yes, I think that was, I wasn't at the meeting, but.
Yeah, I had a meeting with some of the board members that probably some of them are here, and just agreed to kind of continue discussing the drainage concerns, primarily just leaving it up to the engineers, the experts. So if Amit's going to be involved sort of in a peer review capacity for Tidewatch, we've provided John Shagnon with all the plans, and, we'll be happy to work with him, just like we did on 1169 Sagamore, and, happy to work with the third party that the city would choose as well. We don't really we don't care who it is. I'm sort of committed to working with the neighbors to make sure that the drainage concerns are addressed. So, and I think leaving it up to the experts that we all engage, I think will be the way to get there. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if a culvert under the road is the solution or not, but we're definitely willing to look at that.
Well, just looking at the site, and from the back at Tidewalk side too, it looks like there's a lot of water moving towards that site, so I think a lot's got to be done to address that.
Yeah, I think Jones Beach has done a good job with getting all the water which is significant. I think that's heading towards Sagamore now. It's, half the site, the front half of that site is all draining. It's all pretty much impervious at this point with roof and pavement, so it's all running into Sagamore. So we're capturing all that storm water, and so there will be some additional water sort of directed towards the back, and there may be some ability to increase some of the size of maybe that bio-retention pond too. I don't know if we can make that a little bit larger. So we're definitely,
Yeah, and it's
we
all
understand,
ledge.
yeah,
So
we understand
where's it gonna go?
drainage is the number one concern, similar to what we had over at the Hebert property at 1169. So we know we have that significant one to address, and we're obviously working with them on landscaping as well, which there will likely be some changes and additions made to that plan, so.
Any other comments at the moment, or we can?
It'll still need to be tied into our final design plans with Sagamore as far as the driveway goes and.
Yeah, that's finalizing the grade at the top of the hill, which I believe we're getting tomorrow from Wright Pierce. So we'll have our sight lines, or at least the final grades, to work together on sight lines for that.
All right. And then, something I forgot to mention, but we did add a sidewalk, along the front of our property. And I just wanted to make sure, if you could look and make sure that ties in the way you guys want to, us to tie that in, because right now there's, the sidewalk ends, there's a big gap, I guess, across our property. Where
Yeah, we designed our project assuming you guys would have your driveway at the low end of the hill where you have it now, because the sight lines were better in that location. That was our assumption. We do have plans for us to do the sidewalk in that area, because we don't know when or if this project goes forward. So we need to account on our end having a sidewalk.
Right. If you beat us to it, that's fine with us, I guess. But if and it sounds like you might.
More than likely.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure. It varies from being tight to the white line to then being far off the white line. So I wasn't sure if you wanted us to kind of move the whole road, narrow the road
When
up.
we get our final tomorrow, I'll get that to you guys so we have the same driveway opening location.
All right. Yeah, that'd be great.
You addressed bringing gas to the site or using propane. I know we can't require it, but I'd ask you to consider not using either and look about air source heat pumps or some other sort of sustainable technology that a lot of people are putting in today. Could make it a better product for your end user, and certainly better for the city's greenhouse gas emissions. So something to consider.
Look at all options.
All right, we can move on to public comment. If anyone would like to make comments, you can come up to this chair and state your name and address. And just remind everyone, this is not a dialogue, it's just for you to present your comments to the committee. So it's not a question and answer, but if you do have questions, I would just advise you include them in your comments, and then after the public comment, we can ask them to the applicant, or they can take notes and address them. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Mike. I'm good. First, thanks, everybody, for what you do. I know there's been some press about other stuff going on in the city with regard to planning, but we appreciate everybody's hard work and certainly all the engineering and the effort that's gone on in this project. And no one would object, all the folks here.
Just state your name, just for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Tim McNamara. I'm an abutter at 579,
Thank
which
you.
is a whole bunch of us. No one would object to the fact that the replacement of what's there right now wouldn't be a good thing for the city and for the surrounding abutters, but the project size and the associated risks that go with it are what we're concerned about. We've touched on a lot of these things, and again, thanks again to these folks for all of their focus on things, but we still have grave concerns, big concerns. Wetlands. I've done a bit of research. I'm not an engineer by any means, but I've been after this thing for some time now. While there aren't wetlands on the parcel, which is what some of the report says, the package that was reported to you, what happens around there is really potentially detrimental to us. We have a lot of water flow already, and when we change this surface, even with the drainage and all the design of drainage, we're very concerned about what might flow in the direction not only of our properties, wet basements, et cetera, which are already there, but also the wetlands, which are something that the city and all of us are concerned about. Drainage. So much design and effort has gone into this. I learned a lot in looking at it, and Mike and the team talking to us about it. Runoff still has a big concern to me. I'm a little bit lost as to why even half of the runoff couldn't go to Sagamore still, because in their design, they're taking the runoff even down near Sagamore and driving it back towards the retention ponds, which would be closer to Tide Watch, which is concerning. And I didn't know whether or not there was a city tie-in to the city water management and runoff management on Sagamore. I don't know if we have drains there. I don't believe we do, from some discussions with, again, Mike and team at our last meeting. Should this go through, one of the things that we're concerned about, again, as a community generally, and the butters across the way too, is there's a maintenance, in the package, there's a maintenance protocol for the drainage systems on what is right now a hill of granite, all right? It is a granite top. All of Severino's folks know this to be true. But even the plan for just a 4-unit condominium plan looks complicated. And who's going to fund it? When you mentioned, or when it was mentioned today, sorry, about condominium construction or the documentation, that all concerns me as to whether or not somebody could do that or they could fund it. We have addressed, thank you very much, the notion of an abutters engineer opinion. We'd like to make sure that this committee does not go, or TAC does not go forward with approving this yet until we have that. And we've sort of mitigated as much of the concern as we possibly can. That's with regard to drainage. Traffic. There is a H1 image up there. I don't know if it's possible to bring it up, but there's a sight line thing about stopping. The crest of that hill is so close to even the lower driveway, which was a change from what the ZBA approved, or had originally considered, rather. And that sight line, highway access plan, I think is what it is there on your list. That sight line, I just drove it yesterday. I got grandbabies just down the road, and I drive it every day. And that sight line is middle of the small driveway there at the bottom from whatever crest of the hill. If it meets all of DOD's requirements and all of our traffic safety requirements, then I'm zipped. But it seems to me that nobody stops in the middle of a driveway. They stop to make their turn at least another 15 feet up the hill, which is already a very short and considered space. And if you put one car behind somebody who's stopped right now, then I'm not sure you're going to see the bumper of that car before you're on it. So that concerns me a great deal, along with some of my other neighbors. It also stated something about a small sample review. And I just want to make sure that DOT or the city's professionals are on top of that as well. The tree cut line, which was on one of your other diagrams, you don't need to go there, Peter, but the tree cut line, the concern goes back to the fact that it is already a granite hilltop, and we can all see when big pines go down and they rip their roots out from what is not a lot of soil, that what is left could be at risk because of such a significant change in the topography. It could cause absorption problems. I heard about soils and different types of things, which I know nothing about, other than the dirt I get under my nails. And then there's also a T1 diagram, and I think I heard a little bit of it, maybe it was from our deputy fire chief, about the turnaround. The thing I stated in my comments to the town, to the city, is that turnaround looks too small for a UPS truck, no less a fire safety rig that we might try and get in and out of there. My other concern is if a landscaper went in there with a trailer on the back, which they always have, even if they went by mistake, turning around and that thing's going to be tough, and backing out onto Islington, or I'm sorry, backing out onto Sagamore would be crazy. So that's what I have there. And then on that site then too, those two buildings, 3 and 4, have two things in my area of concern. From the original plan, they have moved closer to the property line, the corners in the back, and now they are proposed with walkout basements, which were not what was proposed in the ZBA's approval, conditional approval process. And I just wonder whether or not it would have gone through the same approval process had they known that that was a potential to the buildings. Those 3 and 4 are also larger than what was originally proposed. I dare not call it a bait and switch, because I was coached on that. But there's something wrong if it's within the confines and the boundaries of conditional approval from the ZBA. Okay, again, I'll stop on that front, but it just seems to me there's a lot of latitude that's been taken in that regard. Walkouts, crawl spaces, closing. Please pause any approval for a period of time to make sure all proposals and these assumptions, and granted, we can't plan for everything, but that these assumptions have been fully vetted and validated to really mitigate any of the challenges that we discuss in front of you. So with that, I'll give it back to somebody else to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Mary Contrello, Unit 5, 579 Sagamore Avenue. Way back when, I was involved with the city, the Technical Advisory Committee, Planning Board, and everything, as Tidewatch build-outs were going forward. So some of my questions have to do, or some of my comments, have to do with the adverse experiences we had then, but weren't addressed by the Technical Advisory Committee and eventually the Planning Committee. And I spent many a night going back to the council to have things reapproved or rearranged. And I don't want to see these guys who are working very hard, I don't want to see them on that same track. And I don't want to see Tidewatch on the same track of having to get back to, we have to be at the council meeting, so we have to object. I think we are all beholden to doing the right thing now to save time and money and anguish down the line. A couple of comments I want to make from dealing with the runoff situation. The original developer on one set of buildings failed to account for the runoff. And in 2008, 9, 10, and 11, the association had to have the new developer redo all the drainage around two buildings and dig out. It was an enormous, over $250,000 project. It was from the same kind of drainage, same kind of water flow off the rocky shale that's along Sagamore Avenue. Where you're talking about where these buildings are, our experience at Tidewatch, which is the same contiguous granite outcroppings, was that where we had intended to go down 2 or 3 or 4 more feet, we couldn't. There was just too much more granite. So my question is, have borings been done where the buildings are going to be so that we know how deep you can actually go? We had to do that in one part of the build-out when it was discovered that actually 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings had been significantly built below grade, and John can speak to that. So, I mean, there are, for this particular topography, there needs to be answers ahead of time to some things, and I'm trying to bring up some of these things. We could not put certain buildings at the level they were supposed to be because of too much blasting on that same rock outcropping that goes through. And if anybody drives through Tidewatch, there's a group of houses up high that are perched on the right rock outcropping. And when it rains, in the wintertime and freezes, it's a sheet of ice. Same thing happens, and I bring this up to you, you're all talking about the drainage over here going towards Sagamore and the drainage coming down our road. But actually, if you live across the street from that, as I do, and my office looks out on it, and it rains, the rain runs right off the hill, not down the road. The water that's coming into that lower portion that goes toward the mail house is running right off the hill. You move enough of those trees, you put more impervious surfaces up there. I don't think the drainage plan as constructed right now has accounted for that much more water flow in that direction. We had that same experience, as I said, behind one building, which there are records in the city of me yelling at people. All right, so the other thing is about the blasting requirements, which we go back to. If you haven't done the borings, which we had to do for certain things at Tidewatch, we had intended to go down 2, 3, 4 more feet in some areas, and we couldn't. I mean, the amount of blasting was so great that we would impair already existing buildings, and we weren't even near other houses. So, all right. In terms of the drainage ditch that you see in Tidewatch that runs along and then goes under the road and then looks like a wetland area, then goes under the next road, that is kind of catty-corner to here, right. It comes where you see the dark line there. It's right across from there. There's 2 different ponds, and they go down. There's a drainage ditch that the town, from back in 84, 85, insisted that we put in when we did the final build-out. And by the way, John Shagnon can speak to a lot of this, because I met with John Shagnon every week for 3 years. And he actually loves me still.
Still willing to work with you.
Well, I've been ill, so I didn't know that this was going on, but I'm happy to engage with John. That's the outlet. The city, there's the Jones Conservation Avenue that's behind that needed drainage. That drains from the old dump. So all of that is coming down and going out. And when we had the final build-out, 2008 through 2010 was the final phase of it, the city was there every other week, practically inspecting that we had to get that drainage ditch out into Sagamore capable to carry the expected volume. So we had to expand it, we had to dig it out, there were a number of things. And I think all these things need to be addressed before there's any stamp of approval. I actually want to give these people some information that will kind of say, maybe we had better look at this a little harder before we put a final plan out. And I want to protect the hard work that many of these people who have been here at Tidewatch since the very beginning or early on have gone through our build-outs and different things that we've done to preserve the property and make it what it is today. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you agree with me?
As usual, your counsel was great. Jerry Stowe, 579 Sagamore. I think Tim pretty much covered, and Mary certainly added to what I was going to say, but one of the points that I just want to emphasize about the drainage, if you look at that picture up there, I bet there's 3 times the amount of hard surface that's been added to that hill, and it's going to be draining down into Tidewatch a good deal. So that's something that I hope everyone will consider. I think enough's been said on drainage. As far as traffic goes, you know, I looked at this, and I actually viewed a couple of your work sessions when you were talking about sightline. And one of the things you discussed was lowering the grade at the top of the hill. And I don't know whether that's still in the discussion, but I can tell you from experience, I've lived in Tidewatch for 22 years, and I've run out of fingers and toes on the number of times I have come over the hill northbound, had to stop waiting for somebody to make a left turn into Tidewatch, whose driveway is further down than this driveway, and I just sat there listening to the squeal of brakes behind me, doing this. So it's a serious problem that I think needs a serious solution. So I just like that, I don't know, I know if you try and lower the grade, a lot's involved, you have to build walls for front yards, et cetera. But I think we really made to take that under consideration. And if nothing else, consider lowering the speed limit. Not everybody will do it, but it might be one way to help control it. And finally, I'd like to just add on to something that Tim said about the changes have been made here on a conditional use permit or conditional approval. And I'm just wondering, I don't know what's involved and what can be changed in a conditional approval, but if somebody knows, I know at least Tim and I would certainly know, and I like other people like to know, what are the restrictions when the ZBA makes a conditional approval of a site plan, what can be changed? And I think it would be helpful to everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do, folks.
Thank you.
May I make an additional comment?
Well, can we let some other people talk?
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Susan Harding. I live at 594 Sagamore, neighbors of Tidewatch, and across the street. So the two issues I want to address is, one, again, the traffic. Because as it is now, I mean, conceptually, and as far as laws, I don't know what that is, but real life, trying to get out of my driveway is already very challenging. So I'm trying to back out of my driveway, and I have the good people of Tidewatch and the apartments trying to come out there. And then you have the people coming towards the beach and now going the other way. And now you're gonna add possibly 8 more cars coming in and out of that small area. And that, to me, just screams a safety concern. Because now there's gonna be people coming out of there, then maybe Evan's gonna be home next door, Linda's gonna try to get out of her driveway. I mean, there's a lot congested in a very small area on a road that's already dangerous, and I'm sure that anybody that's been standing on that road all this time with the road work will tell you, because I think that some of those guys almost got hit. So the traffic is a big concern. And I don't know anything about the drainage, but I can tell you, it seems like you might want to consider just putting 2 houses in and forgetting about the ones in the back and not dealing with all the drainage and the trees and all of that. But for me, it's the blasting. I am so uneasy about that. I cannot even tell you, because I had them drilling in front of my house for an entire summer. And I'm telling you, like, that almost made me, like, it's horrible. I cannot even begin to tell you how horrible it is. Every day, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., boom, 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 all day long, every day. And this idea of blast, I mean, are you gonna dynamite? Are you gonna pound? I just think it's environmentally terrible. And just for the physical and mental well-being of everyone around, it's horrible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Brown, and I own and live at 650 Sagamore Avenue, and I own 698 Sagamore Avenue, which is currently occupied by my daughter. Coming out of 698, which is at the hill kind of has a little dip, she's at the top of the hill. She can only go towards town from her driveway. There's no way she can go take a left out of her driveway. It's just the traffic is horrendous. So I'll go back to my property now. I'm at 650, which is going to be directly across from this new entrance of more cars coming in. And the rate of speed that those cars sail over that hill, they can barely stop. And when they do slam on their brakes, they're mad at you because you're coming out of your driveway and there was no car in your line of sight when you decided to go. And when you decide to go, you go. There's no hesitation. And they're mad, and then they tail you all the way into town because you had the audacity to leave your driveway. And pretty soon, I will not be able to go left towards the beach either, because the traffic is so bad. Adding another driveway with 8 cars plus company and everything is just, it's really a bottleneck. It's a bottleneck there now, it's just gonna get worse. The other thing no one's touched on is, I walk every single day. I have to cross the street through that traffic. My dog knows, go like crazy, he does that command. And, you know, people don't stop, and there's a lot of pedestrians on that street. There's a lot of cyclists on that street. Road races on that street, and just the traffic, it goes too fast. I don't know what the solution is, but adding another entrance at that spot or on that hill is really dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here or on Zoom?
Hi, Jean Rolsvig, 579 Sagamore. Wasn't planning on talking, but in addition to the drainage, have you heard of climate change and different weather patterns and more rain, which would produce more water coming down to Tidewatch area? Crossing the street, I walk every day also, and I wouldn't dare try to cross there. I do walk down to the entrance of the cemetery where the flashing yellow lights are. Do you know how many times I've pressed the yellow light and they still fly through? I mean, do we really want to wait until there's a death on the road before we address the situation more seriously? And there was a third thing, and I can't think of it now because emotions are coming in. Water, buildings, cars. Bikes. Trees absorb moisture, and when you take the trees away, then they can't absorb the moisture. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna let Peter on Zoom. Go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Peter Whistle. I'm also a resident of Tidewatch, Unit 75. Tim McNamara mentioned the difficulty of emergency vehicles getting in and out of the private driveway. I'm just looking at the chart, T1, and it looks like it would be a tight turn under any circumstances, and I just wonder if a couple of Chevy Suburbans or F-250 pickups are parked in the driveway, whether a fire engine can get in there or out at all. I question whether you can allow parking in the private driveway. And if that's the case, you're going to have cars parked out on Sagamore Avenue on the southbound shoulder of the road. Even if you allowed parking there, you consider the guests of one of the residents for a 4th of July barbecue, a baby shower, kid's birthday party. There's no parking area sufficient in this site plan to provide for that. Those cars are going to be parked on Sagamore Avenue, exasperating the already dangerous condition of that road. Even if you lowered the crest of the hill, the cars parked along Sagamore Avenue are going to obscure the sight line to the driveway. I just don't see how the placement of this driveway, the width of this driveway is going to accommodate the emergency vehicles, run the needs of the residents and their guests. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom, please raise your hand. Seeing none. Anyone else present?
May I make another comment?
Please come up.
Thank you. Again, Mary Pontrello, Unit 5, Tide Watch, 579 Sagamore Avenue. Several people brought up the question of returning this to the zoning board approval and whether this can be. I was ill during a lot of that process, but I recently reviewed some of it, and the question occurred to me that maybe this needs to be returned to the zoning board, because I was at the meeting that night, and it is actually on the record where it was decided on fuzzy math. And what I mean is that the counselor for them compared that there was 117 units at Tide Watch and so many apartments on a certain amount of acreage, when in fact the comparison should have been buildings on the acreage, not units. The units are not individual. The units are contained in a building. And some buildings have 2, and some buildings have 3, and some buildings have 4. Same with the apartment. One apartment building has 20, one has 40. And on that basis, then there should only be 2 houses on that piece of property, based on how, comparing building to building, rather than units to building. So I wonder if that can, I don't know, this is something I'm unaware of, but I would consider this a reason to return it to the zoning board for reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Terry Stowe, 579 Sagamore. I just have a conclusion to Mary's statement. I was a former president of the board, immediate past president, and I challenged the figures that they were using, and they told me that I was totally wrong. So I went to the tax office. I proved by all the deeds, all the tax records and everything, that we did have 117 units in 46 buildings, which made us more than 1 acre per building. We have 59.6 acres, I believe, in Tide Watch. So we had more than the 1 acre per building that they were using as a comparison, and yet they continued to say we had 117 units, which each one constituted a building. So we didn't meet the same criteria that they were using. So I think, but then when we submitted it, asked for a rehearing, it was denied. So they continue to wallow in their ignorance of the data that's out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
It dawned on me, Tim McNamara, 579. It dawned on me with the storm that might be coming, as I look at that, and we look at what we have at Tide Watch, which are wide roads and lots of natural space to dump snow. Where's the snow going to go? So that's a little bit of a concern, and that again just comes back to the notion that on this granite cap that God probably didn't, create to have built on, are 4 units really the right thing to do, or is there something else that the developer should consider? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any more comments? Last call.
Rod Burdette, on 579 Sagamore, Unit 46. I have a question about the basements in these units. And we talked about blasting and drilling, and we're sitting on all this ledge, and apparently no provision has been made for what they're going to have as far as basements. Are they going to have crawl spaces? That's what we have in Tide Watch because it's ledge that we're sitting on. So are they going to have crawl spaces, or are they going to have stand-up basements? If they have stand-up basements, they're going to have to take a ton of rock out of there, and that's going to either be blasted or there's going to be a heck of a lot of drilling. So that's my concern about whatever kind of basement they have there. And it sounds like no provision is made for these sites in terms of what's there. What kind of ledge are they sitting on?
Thank you. All right. Seeing no one else rise, I'm going to close the public comment portion for now and turn it back for further discussion. I'll just clarify, the zoning board approval was conditioned that the design and location of the dwellings may change as a result of this process. So I think, they approved 4 units on a lot. They flipped them based on the driveway location. I think it's still compliant with the zoning board approval. And that's why we've put that condition on, because of this process where things do change based on the site plan review process. Any other things we want to clarify?
Well, that was a PUD. The Tidewatch development was a PUD, so that a different type of development they were reviewing in terms of how the development worked. And going to the Board of Adjustment for relief gives them relief from the zoning requirements in that zone. So they got the appropriate relief for what they're trying to do. One other comment I have is that the wetlands, one thing I wanted to bring up when we were asking questions is, in addition to the independent engineering analysis, I'd like to have a wetland scientist review, go out to confirm the wetland locations on the site, just to verify it. So like we typically do, an independent wetland scientist to review the project.
No issue with that at all.
Pat, go ahead.
Just a couple of things to clarify in regards to fire department access. I think a couple people made some points that jog my memories of some issues we've had with similar situations. In the event that, the buildings do not have fire suppression systems, based on a 20-foot wide fire department access, there would be.
Pat, can you just pull the mic closer? I think, thanks.
A 20-foot wide fire department access road would require signage for no parking on either side. And what I've noticed in some of these areas that even do have the compliant turnarounds is that when we visit these properties at a later time, they turn into parking spaces. People have no idea that's what they're for. They're for emergency vehicle turnaround. They become parking spaces, so we expect signage for that as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, we do have a no parking sign at the turnaround, and we will look at widening that, and we can add signage for the fire lane, no parking on the driveway.
Yeah, and the depth as well is, again, it's all in the IFC. When I'm looking at the turnaround, like a good portion of the truck is beyond the pavement, where you're showing snow also being piled. So.
Right.
I did want to just make one point about traffic. We did, I think it's part of the packet that we submitted, we did have a memo from Steve Pernoff, our traffic engineer, regarding trips per day analysis. I think it's important to note that not only are we analyzing the best location for our driveway, which we think we're pretty close to where it needs to be, we're closing off a very, basically an entire open curb cut. The entire frontage is open. Vehicles exit and enter that site wherever they want to now. And while the business is not fully operational right now, there's 2 existing businesses in the 2 buildings that are there now. They're not 100% operational because the intent is to shift the use of the site to single-family residential. But the analysis that Mr. Pernoff provided to us and we provided in turn to the city is that ultimately the trips per day will be less under this scenario than it would be with a fully operational site of car detailing and auto body repair. The trips per day are less, albeit not much less, but they are less. And I think we're doing a better job with safety from a transportation standpoint. So I just wanted to just make sure that's kind of out there on the record, because that is the reality based on the math.
And I'll add to that the speed data that was provided is consistent with the speed data that we've been collecting out there ourselves too. So I have confidence in the analysis they've done. It does not meet minimum site distance requirements, so that is still a concern, but we still need to tie it into our design of the roadway and see what the final sight lines will be out there. so we don't have a final determination on it at this point.
Any other comments? So we'll start the third-party review process for the wetland and the stormwater. And anything else in the meantime?
So this is returning back here next month, or
Well,
returning
it's
back to?
Well, when all the reports are back in,
Yeah,
may not be next month.
okay.
I think I'll make a motion to postpone it to next month, just being optimistic, but if we have to postpone it again, we might, just so everybody's aware that the way we do that usually is we give it a date certain so that they don't have to re-advertise the whole thing. So keep an eye on the meeting calendar, and you'll see if it's postponed or if it's ready to go ahead. But they need to get their engineering for the stormwater and the wetland independent review, and we got to look at the traffic, the sightline data that we're going to get, and bring all that back to the next meeting. So I'm going to make that motion to postpone to the May meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Case is postponed. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question, just for next year? It's not, we're not going to get an abutters notice, we have to keep an eye on the calendar, is what
That's
I
right.
thought I heard.
That's right.
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is it typically a Tuesday afternoon, first month?
Design of the dwelling.
Everything. Just, basically, it's 4 units.
All right.
A little more going on here, Sean.
Item C.
A little more going on here than Stroud.
Yeah, I like it though.
There's nothing happening.
Item C is the request of 15 Middle Street Realty Estate Holding Co. LLC owner for property located at 15 Middle Street, requesting site plan review approval for the addition of 3 residential units in the existing commercial building. Said property is located on Assessor Map 126, Lot 12, and lies within the Character District 4 Downtown Overlay and Historic Districts. Who is here to present?
It's 2 people.
Too much traffic getting in here?
Locally, yeah.
Local traffic.
Really local.
All right. Well, Alex, you had
Ready for the easy
to
one?
stay at the beginning and the end.
Never say that. Okay, so 15 Middle, there's only 3 items on the list. Please provide information about sustainable practices. So we did submit something just today from the architect that listed everything inside.
Okay.
The next item is provide the development agreement from Juliet Walker for planning board application. So we did include that in this, and we will include it for the PB application as well. Next item, please provide waiver requests for site review agreement and associated surety. So we updated that waiver request letter, and that was submitted as well. So I think that's about it. This is a super easy site.
Sure. Okay. Any other comments or TAC members, Pat?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we're looking at here. I remember when this came up the first time, and if my recollection was correct, the concerns were the lack of parking and what that might do with what are some difficult intersections that are well-traveled, and also some of our primary response routes for good portions of the city. How has that been addressed? I don't
So-
really see much information on that.
Right, and this one kind of had an odd route through the permitting process, but way back when, we did do traffic studies. We were gonna have off-site parking, valet, all these different things. Because in that go-around, parking was required. In this configuration of uses and number of units, there's no parking required. So there's no change.
So other people in here understand the parking requirements more than me. That's the case, no parking required?
Yeah.
For residential in this?
Yep, in the downtown overlay, well, they need parking, but they get a 4-space credit.
And
The restaurant and the inn don't require parking. And then, so for the 3 units, it's 3.9 spaces, and we round up to 4. So that 4-space credit gets counted towards the parking for the 3 units.
So there's really no change proposed with the exterior of the site at all?
No, I understand, and I remember at the time, the reason that they didn't finish the 3rd floor was because of the parking concerns. But I guess the rules have changed since then on the parking.
I don't know if the rules have changed, it's the same, but
I think the downtown overlay was in place at the time.
Right.
I think it was more a decision not to develop.
Well, I think at the time, you didn't need site plan review. You didn't need, the letter from Juliet determined that you didn't need to do site plan review for what you were,
Yeah.
for the
so-
renovation of the restaurant.
Right, but back like 5 years ago, we would need parking with what we wanted to do there, but we scaled it back. So in what they have now, the units that are proposed up above, there's no parking.
Understood.
So it's pretty straightforward. I'll open it, no public here on Zoom, so we won't allow any public comment or take any public comment.
Make a motion to move this forward with the conditions on the sheet.
All right.
Second.
So, any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll adjourn this meeting.
Oh, no.